Welcome back, Truth to a T. Please like, subscribe, and share this video, and leave a comment down below. Check the video description for valuable discount links.
Welcome back to the channel, everyone. Today we're wading into the steaming radioactive swamp that is international trade, specifically tariffs. Now I know what you're thinking. Tariffs? That sounds about as much fun as a root canal performed by a badger with anger issues. And yes, while it's true that tariffs are often about as popular as a surprise case of shingles, they're a surprisingly important, nuanced, and frankly, hilarious mess. Because let's be honest, the world of international trade is basically a high-stakes game of poker played by people in ill-fitting suits, where the chips are jobs, the beer is lukewarm, and the only consistent winners are the lobbyists. And in this high-stakes game, tariffs are essentially the equivalent of flipping the table over and screaming, "We're not playing by your rules anymore." So buckle up, buttercups, because today we're going to break down 10 ways tariffs actually boost America's economy. But be warned, this isn't your Econ 101 lecture, this is the economic equivalent of strapping yourself into a broken carnival ride. It's going to be bumpy, probably a little nauseating, and there's a good chance you'll want to throw up afterwards. The first potential benefit of tariffs is that they can act like a big burly bouncer standing outside the doors of American industries, telling foreign competition, "Not so fast, pal." See, when a country slaps a tariff on imported goods, it makes those goods more expensive, which can then give domestic industries a much-needed leg up. Think of it like this. If you're trying to sell your artisanal, hand-churned butter at a farmer's market, and suddenly someone sets up shop next to you selling mass-produced, factory-farmed butter at half the price, you're probably not going to be thrilled. In fact, you might even start wishing for a hefty butter import tax to even the playing field. Of course, like most things in life, it's not quite that simple. Because while tariffs can certainly protect domestic industries in the short term, they can also lead to higher prices for consumers. And if those industries become too reliant on tariffs, they might not be incentivized to innovate or become more efficient, which could ultimately hurt them in the long run. It's a bit like if that artisanal butter maker, after successfully lobbying for the butter import tax, just decides to sit back, relax, and start charging $20 a stick because hey, there's no competition anymore. Now this next one is a real crowd pleaser because who doesn't love a good job creation story? The idea here is that by making foreign goods more expensive, tariffs will encourage consumers to buy American-made products, which in turn will lead to more demand for American workers. It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? Factories humming, assembly lines churning, everyone wearing hard hats and carrying lunch pails. But hold on a minute, because like a beautiful mirage in the desert, this promise of job creation can be deceiving. See, while tariffs might create jobs in some industries, they can also lead to job losses in others. For example, if a tariff on steel makes cars more expensive to produce in the US, that could lead to fewer cars being sold, which could then lead to layoffs at car dealerships and auto parts stores. It's a bit like playing a game of economic whack-a-mole. You might win a few rounds, but you're never quite sure where the next mole is going to pop up. This one is pretty straightforward. When the government imposes tariffs, it collects revenue from those tariffs. It's like a tax on imports, and that money can then be used to fund all sorts of important government programs, like infrastructure projects, education, or even just reducing the deficit. Think of it as a little bonus for Uncle Sam, a way to pad the government's wallet without having to raise taxes on, actual Americans. However, there's a catch, because of course there is. While tariffs do generate revenue for the government, that revenue ultimately comes from the pockets of consumers and businesses, who now have to pay more for imported goods. It's like that old saying, there's no such thing as a free lunch. Or in this case, there's no such thing as free government revenue. Unless you're the government, in which case, congratulations, you just found yourself a new revenue stream. Now, for those of you who aren't familiar with the term trade deficit, it basically means that a country is importing more goods and services than it's exporting. In other words, it's buying more stuff from other countries than it's selling to them. And while a trade deficit isn't necessarily a bad thing in and of itself, some people argue that it can lead to job losses and economic instability. Enter tariffs, the economic equivalent of a take that in a playground argument. The idea here is that by making foreign goods more expensive, Tariffs will discourage imports and encourage exports, thereby reducing the trade deficit. But, and I cannot stress this enough, it's not always that simple. See, other countries aren't exactly known for taking kindly to having tariffs slapped on their exports. In fact, they might retaliate with tariffs of their own, which can then lead to a tit-for-tat trade war, where everyone ends up worse off. It's a bit like trying to win an argument by setting your neighbor's house on fire. Sure, you might technically win, but everyone's going to get burned in the process. Let's talk about fair trade practices because in a perfect world, international trade would be a lovely, harmonious affair with everyone playing by the rules and nobody exploiting anyone else. But this being the real world, where fairness often takes a backseat to profit, tariffs are sometimes seen as a way to level the playing field. You see, when a country engages in unfair trade practices like dumping cheap goods on the market below cost or using forced labor, tariffs can be used as a way to pressure that country to clean up its act. It's a bit like telling the playground bully, "You can't sit with us anymore until you learn to play nice." Of course, the effectiveness of this approach depends on a lot of factors, including the willingness of the other country to change its ways, the potential economic fallout of a trade war, and whether or not anyone involved actually remembers what the rules are supposed to be in the first place. It's complicated, messy, and often involves a lot more yelling than anyone would like. But hey, sometimes you gotta break a few eggs to make a fair trade omelet, right? This one is all about self-sufficiency, baby, because in a world where global supply chains can be as fragile as a house of cards in a hurricane, some argue that it's important for countries to be able to produce essential goods domestically, just in case things go sideways. And what better way to encourage domestic production than by slapping a tariff on those pesky foreign imports? Think of it as the economic equivalent of stocking your basement with canned goods, bottled water, and ammunition. You might not need it, but it's better to be safe than sorry, right? Of course, the downside is that this approach can lead to higher prices for consumers and less choice in the marketplace. It's a bit like choosing to only shop at your local convenience store. Sure, it's convenient, but you're probably going to pay a premium for the privilege, and the selection might leave something to be desired. Plus, you might miss out on all the exciting, exotic products the rest of the world has to offer. Now, this one might seem a bit counterintuitive at first, because how on earth could making things more expensive actually stimulate economic growth? Well, the theory here is that by protecting domestic industries and encouraging domestic consumption, tariffs can lead to increased investment and job creation, which can then lead to a virtuous cycle of economic growth. It's like giving the economy a good, old-fashioned jumpstart, a little jolt to get things moving again. Of course, like a jumpstart, the effects of tariffs on economic growth are often temporary, and can come with some unwanted side effects like inflation and retaliation from trading partners. It's a bit like trying to cure a headache by banging your head against a wall. It might provide temporary relief, but it's probably not a sustainable long-term solution. Emerging industries, those bright, shiny beacons of innovation and economic potential. But just like a delicate flower, emerging industries often need a little extra care and attention to help them grow strong. That's where tariffs come in, acting like a protective greenhouse, shielding these fledgling industries from the harsh winds of international competition. It's a lovely thought, isn't it? Nurturing these baby industries, helping them find their footing so they can eventually compete on the global stage. However, just like a plant that's been stuck in a greenhouse for too long, industries that become too reliant on tariffs can become stunted and uncompetitive. They might not develop the same level of efficiency or innovation as their international counterparts, which could ultimately hurt them in the long run. It's a delicate balancing act, finding that sweet spot between protection and competition. It's like trying to teach a baby bird to fly by keeping it in a cage. You might think you're doing what's best, but you're actually preventing it from reaching its full potential. In the cutthroat world of international trade, where countries are constantly vying for a bigger slice of the economic pie, tariffs can be a powerful bargaining chip. Think of them as the economic equivalent of a pair of brass knuckles in a negotiation. They might not be pretty, but they can certainly get people's attention. By threatening to impose tariffs, countries can pressure their trading partners into making concessions, like opening up their markets or adopting fairer trade practices. It's all about leverage, baby. Of course, just like using actual brass knuckles in a negotiation, this approach comes with some inherent risks. For starters, it can poison relationships with trading partners, leading to distrust and retaliation. And if things escalate too far, it could trigger a full-blown trade war, which, as we've discussed, is generally not a good look for anyone involved. Last but not least, we come to the argument that tariffs can actually encourage innovation. See, the theory goes that by protecting domestic industries from foreign competition, tariffs give companies breathing room to invest in research and development, to come up with new and improved products, and to generally up their game. It's a bit like giving a kid a set of Legos and telling them to go wild. Without the pressure of having to compete with pre-made toys, they're free to let their imaginations run wild and create something truly unique. However, critics argue that this is a bit like saying that the best way to encourage a kid to learn to ride a bike is to keep them in a padded room. Sure, they might be safe and comfortable, but they're not going to learn anything new or push themselves to their full potential. In the same way, some argue that removing the pressure of competition can actually stifle innovation, leading to complacency and stagnation. So there you have it, folks. 10 ways tariffs potentially boost America's economy. But as we've seen, it's a complex and nuanced issue, with potential benefits and drawbacks that need to be carefully weighed. There's no easy answer, no magic bullet. It's about finding that sweet spot, that delicate balance between protecting domestic industries and promoting free trade, between supporting American workers and ensuring affordable goods for American consumers. Ultimately, the question of whether or not tariffs are a good or bad thing for the economy depends on a whole host of factors, including the specific tariffs in question, the industries they affect, and the overall state of the global economy. It's a constantly shifting landscape, and what works today might not work tomorrow. So what do you think? Are tariffs a necessary evil, a tool to be used strategically, or are they a blunt instrument that does more harm than good? Let us know in the comments below. And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe for more nuanced and hilarious dives into the dumpster fire that is the global economy.